I accidentally texted my dad instead of my therapist for 6 months. He responded every time and never told me. I found out when my therapist asked why I'd gone quiet. So my actual therapist calls me on a Thursday afternoon and says, Jake, I just want to check in because you've been very quiet for the past 6 months. And I say, what do you mean quiet? I text you literally every week. And she says, honey, I haven't heard from you since April. And something in my stomach drops through the floor and keeps going. Let me back up. I started therapy 2 years ago because I am a functional adult who made a responsible decision about his mental health. My therapist is Dr. Carol Webb. Saved her in my phone as Dr. Carol because I'm organized and professional. My dad's name is Carl. Carol, same font, similar energy. Apparently identical enough that when I was half asleep on a Sunday night scrolling my contacts, I hit the wrong name and never once noticed. For 6 months, I have been texting my father my deepest, unfiltered thoughts, fears, childhood memories, and emotional breakthroughs every Sunday night without fail. Full paragraphs. Stream of consciousness. The kind of honesty that is only possible because I believed I was talking to a licensed professional bound by confidentiality. My dad responded every single time. Not once did he say, son, I think you have the wrong number. Not once did he say, this is your father, not your therapist. Not once in 6 months of increasingly personal disclosures did Carl Webb look at his phone and think maybe I should mention this. He just responded, thoughtfully, carefully, like a man who had been handed the most honest version of his son and was terrified that saying anything would make it stop. I find all of this out on a Thursday afternoon from my actual therapist. I open my texts immediately. I go to Dr. Carol. I scroll up. 6 months of messages. Delivered, read, responded to. I scroll to the contact name at the top. Carl, my dad. I sit on my couch for a very long time. Then I scroll through the actual content of what I sent over 6 months, and I want to describe this experience as something other than a full body cringe, but I cannot, because that is precisely what it is. Week 1, I texted about feeling underappreciated at work. Normal enough. Week 3, I texted about my fear of turning into an emotionally unavailable man, which is specifically and directly about my dad. I sent that to my dad. He responded, that's a really healthy thing to recognize. Week 6, I texted about the argument we'd had at Christmas and how it made me feel unseen as a child. He responded, I hear you and I think you're right to feel that way. My dad told me I was right, unprompted, in writing. My dad, who has not said those 3 words in combination my entire adult life, just texted them to me because he thought it was a safe space. Week 9, I texted about being scared of commitment because I watched my parents' marriage and internalized a fear of becoming my father. My dad responded, your father loves you and is probably more scared of having failed you than you know. He wrote about himself in third person to maintain the bit. This man kept the secret for 6 months, responded with the emotional intelligence of an actual therapist, and wrote about himself in third person rather than blow his cover. I don't know whether to be furious or genuinely moved, and I have been sitting in the gap between those 2 feelings for 72 hours. I call him. He picks up on the second ring. I say, Dad. He says, hey son. I say, how long did you know? Long pause. Then he says, first text. I say, you knew from the first text. He says, you called me Dr. Carol. I figured it out pretty quick. I say, and you just answered. He says, you were talking to me, Jake. Actually talking. I hadn't heard you talk like that since you were 12 years old. His voice does something different. I didn't want to be the reason you stopped. I have nothing to say to that. He fills the silence by saying, I looked some things up to make sure I was responding right. I watched 3 YouTube videos about active listening. A pause. I bought a book. I say, you bought a book. He says, boundaries and breakthroughs. Very informative. 2-day shipping. I want to be angry. I have prepared to be angry. But my dad, Carl Webb, retired electrician, man of 12 words on a good day, bought a book about active listening and watched YouTube videos so he could respond properly to his son who thought he was someone else. I say, the thing I said about being scared of becoming you. He says, I know. I say, I didn't mean. He says, you meant it and you should have said it. I'm glad you did. A B. Even if you thought you were telling someone else. Silence. Then he says, are you going to tell your actual therapist? I say, I already did. He says, what did she say? I say, she said you did a better job than most people she knows. He laughs. First genuine surprised laugh I've heard from my dad in years. And he says, so what do we do now? I say, I think we just keep talking. He says, same time Sundays? I say, yeah dad, same time Sundays. I hang up and sit in my apartment thinking about how I spent 6 months accidentally building the most honest relationship I've ever had with my father through a contact misspelling at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night. Dr. Carol says this counts as a breakthrough. I told her I'd keep her posted. I saved her number as Dr. Carol Therapist in all capitals this time. Dad is still just Carl. Some things you don't need to change.